All right, now it's time for our third and final session before we go to our break. This one is focused on fall protection for women. Please welcome our next speaker, Andrea Martin of Whitecap Supply Canada.
Hello, good afternoon. I am going to share my PowerPoint here. So today's discussion is fall protection for women, so crucial knowledge for working safely at heights. My name is Andrea Martin. I am the district sales manager for Whitecap Canada. Prior to coming on board with Whitecap, my focus for the last 18 years has been fall protection. I worked with 3M, for 3M as a fall protection specialist for 8 years. Definitely afraid of heights, so it was a great career choice I took on many, many years ago. I've been fortunate to be named 2022 Top Women in Safety and also appeared in 3M's docuseries Skilled. What I want to kind of talk about today first is let's debunk some myths. So one, any harness will do. They won't. If you are a welder, the last thing you want is a regular webbed harness. We want to get into like a Kevlar hot works. If you're an arc flash, or you're a lineman in utility, you want to get into an arc flash. If we're going to be climbing towers, we're going to get into a specialty harness, so on and so forth. So choosing the right harness for the right application is the important part. Number two, expiry dates. So there is no generated expiry date from manufacturers. It's very, very important to understand that it's based on the actual usage of the harness, the what it looks like versus its actual age. I have seen harnesses last a week. I've seen harnesses last a month or 2 years, but I have seen harnesses that are still brand spanking new after 10. We have to do pre-use inspections on them, and we have to do annual written inspections by a competent person. Number three, fall arrest systems guarantee safety. Simply wearing a harness does not guarantee that you have a full fall protection system. What are you connected to? What are you using as a lanyard or self-retracting lifeline? What is your anchor connector? What's the substrate to which it's attached to? And do you have a rescue plan? And then the fourth one is fall protection equipment is one size fits all. So this kind of leads us into our discussion today around fall protection for women. Gravity doesn't discriminate based on gender. So really, really important discussion as we get into here that harnesses are made for every body. When we look at the types of harnesses that are available out there in the market, you can see your traditional vest style, and then in the middle is a crossover. And then on the far right is kind of that hybrid style where it's not quite the vest style, but it's not the full crossover. In the 18 years of doing this, one of the biggest things that's always come up is not every female wants a crossover harness. So when we talk about harnesses for women, that's usually the go-to is that an employer will purchase a crossover harness and send it out to the field. So we need to ensure that one, it's all about proper fit and comfort. That kind of leads us into, thank you, Juanita, for being a fantastic supermodel for me. What do you feel comfortable in? So when we look at proper fit and comfort, I have gone on to many sites where they could be predominantly men or also have women. And what I notice is that 90% of the workers who are working at heights wearing fall protection gear are not wearing it properly, regardless of the gender. So how do we make sure that a harness fits properly? One, we got to work on the sizing chart based on the manufacturer. I'll get into that in a separate slide. Two, if we're going to wear a vest style harness, we need to ensure that it's in line with our armpits or 6 to 8 inches below our chin. It sits too low, you have the potential that if I grab your shoulder straps, you can slip out of it. If it sits too high, again, in the event of a fall, your back D-ring and your entire harness will shift up about 12 inches. So that means if your chest strap is sitting far too high, there's the potential that you're going to choke. Your back D-ring is going to be in line with your shoulder blades. Far too often on a site, I see that back D-ring sitting into the middle or even worse, down in the lower part of the back. Leg straps, we want to ensure that the leg straps are tight enough. Usually that's by slipping our opposite hand through our leg straps, making a fist and ensuring that we can't pull that fist through those leg straps. So sizing is crucial. When we look at the picture on the right-hand side of Juanita, you can see that the leg straps are a little loose, the chest straps a little wonky, and off we go. We just need to make some subtle adjustments, or we might have to move her down into a harness because we can't adjust that harness any further. So we look at harness classifications and configurations. Every harness will be a class A harness, meaning it's your back arresting D-ring. Your front D-rings will either be descent, so we're going to do for rescue or confined space, or they can be classified for L for ladder climbing, so permanent cable systems on towers and permanent ladders, or they can be classified as D and L together for both. Class E for rescue, those are your shoulder D-rings with your spreader bar. Class P for positioning, so I'm tying rebar, I'm working on a forming wall, so I'm going to have a chain rebar assembly with me. That's going to be my positioning configurations. When I was talking about proper sizing, what I have here, and you're going to see is where that X marks that spot, you are going to see my height and weight. So in one manufacturer's harness, I am a standard size. In another manufacturer's harness, I flutter between the far end of the small, which means that it's just probably not going to fit me correctly. It's going to be too small for my body. So I'm going to move myself up into a medium. I'm still going to have a little bit more adjustment on that end, but a lot more adjustment than I would have in the small. So ensuring that, one, we always make the recommendation that you stick with like manufacturers to ensure that everybody has a consistent, we know that here's the sizing chart. We're just going to hand that same sizing chart out to our team, ask them for their height and weight. When we talk about weight, it is total working weight, because it's not just about the harness that we need to talk about weight for. It's also about those connecting links, because you're going to only be as strong as your weakest link. Going into weakest links, self-retracting lifelines and lanyards. So everybody asks for a women's harness, but nobody asks for a women's lanyard or self-retracting lifeline. What we have to be aware of too is that weight classifications for those connecting links can also change. So manufacturers for certain harnesses can go from 90 to 420 pounds, but then your SRL or your lanyard might start at 100, 120, 150. If you have a lanyard that starts at 150 pounds, but you weigh 100 pounds, that's total working weight, boots, clothes, tools on. What's going to happen? We're always hyper focused on what do we do for the guy who's over 310 pounds or almost 400 pounds, guy or gal. What do we do for that person who is less than the total working weight of our system? So if somebody was to fall wearing a lanyard that has a starting weight, minimum starting weight of 150 pounds, what would happen if they weighed 100 pounds and fell? The dynamic forces on their body, they just don't weigh enough. They're actually going to create more forces on their body because they don't have the capabilities of fully deploying that fall protection system. These are just examples, again, from different manufacturers, understanding that I'm pulling different user manuals, or what I call MOM, manufacturer's operating manuals, because mom's always right. As you can see, the variances that happen within these, so 150 to 310 pounds or 110 to 230 pounds. What is important? What we're seeing out there is that there have been so many CSA standard changes that have taken effect prior to COVID that are still very, very slow to hit the market to ensure that we're using the right gear. So for the major standard changes that came through, number one was the Z259.2.2-17. This is the self-retracting device standard. This had a drastic change in it. I'll talk about that in a second. That took effect in August 1st of 2019. Then we had the personal energy absorbing and energy absorbers in lanyard standard change. That took effect in February 1st in 2020. We also have our fall arresters and vertical lifelines, aka rope grabs. That took effect in June 1st of 2019. And then we also have the full body harness standard change that took effect April 1st of 2019. So a lot. We're seeing this, especially in the construction market, that non-leading edge products are still being used in a leading edge application. So when the standard changed, they took away type 1, type 2, and type 3 self-retracting lifelines, and then they reclassified them regardless of the length under 3 new classifications. There's a 4th one, but there's no product out there to it. So these are the main 3. One is an SRL. So this is a self-retracting lifeline that is meant to be anchored at D-ring height or higher. So if I'm going to work in an elevated platform, I cannot use an SRL classified self-retracting lifeline. I would have to move into a leading edge self-retracting lifeline. The second class was an SRL-R. So that was still your retrievals. Anybody who's worked in confined space, we're going in and out of manholes attached to a davit or a tripod system. Then your self-retracting lifeline, which used to be classified as a type 3, is now classified as an SRL-R. Then we move into a very important classification, and that is your SRL-LE. So any SRL that is purchased and manufactured after that August 1st of 2019 standard change date, if you are anchoring below your back D-ring, regardless of the application, you must be in a self-retracting lifeline that is classified for leading edge. Leading edge under CSA means 2 things. One, it means the capabilities of anchoring below back D-ring to foot level. We never anchor below feet, but to foot level, and or go over a sharp edge. So if I'm working in scaffolding and I'm erecting scaffolding tube is round. It doesn't have a sharp edge, but because as I'm erecting each platform and each stage, I need to anchor below my back D-ring. That is where I require a leading edge self-retracting lifeline. If I am an iron worker, I am standing on top of a structural I-beam. 1, I'm tied off at foot level on that I-beam. And number 2, that I-beam, so structural steel, concrete, anything that's smaller than the edge of a pencil is deemed a sharp edge. So that SRL can go over that edge, bear that edge, and not have a breakage. Just because an SRL is cable doesn't always necessarily mean it's leading edge. So important to understand when we're looking at the user manual. User manuals are going to call out whether it's leading edge. As you can see on the right-hand side of this, there are pictograms. These pictograms here are showing from different manufacturers. One, it's got a big X. There's no way can this thing go over a sharp edge. No way can it bear. What could possibly happen? A web or cable SRL that is not rated for a leading edge will have a failure. And then the bottom pictogram says, yeah, you're good. This is meant for leading edge applications. Some manufacturers design their systems so that all of their SRLs that are leading edge have the same color. So it's quick and easy to identify. Also changed personal energy absorbers and lanyards. So the elimination of E4 and E6, that took effect in February of 2020. But we're still having people call up looking for E4 and E6 lanyards. We're 5 years into the standard change. So no more E4, E6. In the past, it was easy. You're like, hey, I need a 6-foot lanyard with 1 snap hook on one end, 1 rebar on the other hand. I need an E4. You don't have any? Okay, I'm going to go to a different manufacturer. It was easy because it was the same weight ratings. Under the new standard, the manufacturers will indicate those new weight ratings based on the material, based on the manufacturing component. So as we can see here, again, these are different snapshots, and I've just used these X's to quickly identify the capabilities that we're taking different lanyards from different manufacturers, different user manuals, and showing the changes on those weight ratings. So I'm going to challenge everybody that's on here who does work at heights. go back to your fall protection equipment, take a peek at what you're using. If it is to the newer standard, ensure that it's the right product for that application. Look at your weight ratings on your lanyards. Look at your weight ratings on your self-retracting lifelines. They can vary. Even within the same manufacturer, there can be different brands, and that's where variations can also happen. The other standard is our fall arresters and vertical lifelines. So your rope grabs, again, June 1st of 2019, most people on the far right-hand side would be used to seeing just a regular rope grab. Hey, let's attach our 6-foot lanyard onto this. Off we go. Most manufacturers of fall protection never actually allowed a 6-foot lanyard to be attached to a rope grab. It just kind of became an industry norm. Everybody kind of moved that way. Most of the time, the user manual actually called out maximum 36 inches. Under the new CSA standard, it has to have an integral connection to that rope grab. So what you're seeing is all rope grabs sold now will have that integral maximum 30-inch lanyard interconnected into the system. Another thing to keep in mind, if you are using rope and rope grabs, make sure that you use the same manufacturer of rope and rope grabs as they're tested together as complete systems. Then, of course, the last one is the full body harnesses. So that took effect in April of 2019. So very exciting stuff because the standard now formally recognizes the ASTM F886-16, which is the electrical arc performance testing of harnesses. So this has resulted in the new addition of a new class of full body harnesses called the Class R. So if you are purchasing and you require an arc flash lanyard, if it is made after April of 2019, you will see your classification on your label labeled as AR or APR, just depending on your D-ring configurations. The pictogram on the bottom left-hand side is now appearing on arc flash R-rated harnesses. So if you do have an arc flash harness and it is CSA to the new standard, you will see this pictogram within that new labeling. The standard also included a requirement for a means of controlling shoulder strap separation. So where we keep talking about if your chest strap sits too low, you can have that shoulder strap separation. The intent of this is to keep workers in their harness, regardless of the manner in which they may experience a fall. So harnesses now will typically either include a permanent waist belt. So if it has a permanent waist belt, it does not need the back shoulder strap. But as you can see where this arrow is pointing, where this harness does not have a waist belt, you can see this back shoulder strap. Where I have that nice big X, there is a missing back shoulder strap. So if that harness wasn't worn properly, we do have the potential for some further shoulder separation. Don't forget, please, one of the biggest conversations I have on sites is, when did you inspect your equipment last? Especially when they hand it to me and it is full of, it's missing labels, it's full of welding spatter. Pre-use inspection is required by the user every single time you put that piece of gear on. You take off your harness twice a day, you put it back on twice a day, you should be inspecting it twice a day. I have met people who inspected their harness in the morning, they walked through in a petrochem site against something that was warm. When they went to go look at their harness again, they had some charred areas where that hot pipe and their harness came in contact. So it can happen very quickly. Pre-use inspections, annual written inspections, follow the user manual of the equipment in which you have. So don't use ABC manufacturer's inspection or user manual to inspect XYZ's harness. Very, very important. One of the last things I'd also like to see out there is that within promotions and marketing, that we're starting to see more women in all types of harnesses in the promotion and marketing materials. There is a major gap. And when we do see women, we typically see them in that crossover harness. As I mentioned, harnesses are essentially made for every body. And we would love to see more women promoted in the marketing side.
Thanks, Andrea. So we do have time for questions. Friendly reminder once again to enter your questions in the Q&A box. I know some people have been raising their hands throughout the presentations. Unfortunately, we aren't able to take questions that way. So Q&A box is your best way to get your questions answered. So Andrea, what do you recommend for workers whose weight fluctuates over time? Is it the employer's responsibility to provide multiple pieces of equipment for them?
I think that goes back to looking at user manuals too within a harness and looking at sizing charts, because sometimes you can get into a harness, especially if we look at winter. So one of the questions I always ask is, are you going to be working outside in the winter? If I'm very far on the far end of a sizing chart, I'm probably going to move you up a step because you're going to overlap and you're going to have that capability of doing that fluctuation from winter to spring and easily making those adjustments without changing out your harness.
Okay. Uh, One of our participants wants to know, what do you do about the chest strap sitting right on top of the breasts and being either too loose or squishy?
Yeah, so then that's sometimes, so the chest strap, we want that in line. But what I tend to see is a lot of people want to really crank that chest strap across as tight as possible. That's not necessary. 5 point harnesses are 5 points for a reason. There's 5 points of adjustment. So sometimes we just have to adjust the torso component so that we can make some adjustments to the chest strap. If a regular vest style is not comfortable for you, you may want to look into a potential for a crossover, or as I've showed before, it's kind of like a hybrid. So it's not quite a crossover, but it's not a full chest vest style harness.
Okay. Do you have any other recommendations for ensuring proper fit?
Yes, proper fit, follow the user manuals. It's trained in, especially in Ontario, working at heights courses, right? Putting on the harness, ensuring that there's proper fit. And then adding to your training component, look at that user manual, follow that user manual. Call me. I love to come out onto site. I'm usually the first person when I walk out onto site and I see somebody's loose fitting leg straps. I kind of go, hey, bud, you might want to fix that. So, really, the user manual is going to what is going to dictate how to properly adjust and size your harness.
Okay, great. What's an acceptable amount of clothing to wear underneath? Some people wear parka jackets. Wondering if that should be addressed.
Absolutely. So the suggestion is you always wear your harness over top of your clothing, especially if you have zippered clothing. If anybody's like me, my neck gets very cold in the winter, so I crank my jacket up right under my chin. If there was a fall and you were wearing your harness underneath, there's the potential for the choking component within your jacket. So unless you have like a button jacket, so you put it over top and you make that adjustment. What I like is there's so many different types of harnesses that are available out there that have easy adjustments. So if you're the person that is constantly taking on and off their harness, they're taking on, especially this time of the year, they're taking on and off a jacket. We start in the morning, it feels like winter. And as we move throughout the day, it goes into spring and summer. And usually we're into all four seasons in one day in Ontario. So having the quick adjustable capabilities of a harness is a lifesaver. It's a game changer. When it takes 15 seconds to adjust a harness because you kind of upgraded in the line of harnesses, that it's a life-saving piece of equipment. It's very, very important that we make those adjustments. But yeah, usually you're gonna have a jacket, 7-1 type jacket, t-shirt, hoodie, the typical. Get that harness as tight to the body as you possibly can.
Okay. Are there sizes that account for extremely petite women, say under 5 feet and less than 110 pounds?
Yeah, so this is where the concern, and I know I'm still sharing my slide here. So this is where the concern does come in, is that if your 110 pounds is your total working weight, make sure that not just your harness, because the harnesses have adjustability. In this harness, you can see here 90 pounds to as short as about 4'10". But your connecting link, you're only going to be as strong as your weakest link. So that connecting link, your self-retracting lifeline or your lanyard or your rope grab must be rated for your weight at the same time too.
Okay. Um, is there any talk in terms of standards to mandate trauma straps on all harnesses?
They're so great. A lot of manufacturers are now incorporating them. I know 3M has, Guardian has in some of their harnesses, MSA has. So it is becoming a standard kind of built-in feature into most manufacturers' harnesses. They are available as an additional kind of accessory that you can add on to it. I've always been a promoter that it doesn't hurt to have them. One, trauma straps, it helps reduce the orthostatic intolerance or suspension trauma in the event of a fall. But also on that flip side is that if somebody has been able to drop down their trauma straps, stand in them, there's that psychological feeling that they're standing in something, so we can kind of calm them down a little bit more to start working on a rescue too. And they're not flaring their legs all over the place and freaking out. It just kind of gives them that opportunity to stand on something, which leads to the crucial component that anytime anybody works at heights, you better have a rescue plan.
Very good advice. Someone would like to know where to find accurate and robust literature on weakest links for rope grab and lanyards, weight and height minimum testing.
The weakest links, sorry, can you?
Where can we find accurate and robust literature on those weakest link, weight, and height minimum testing?
Would probably come through CSA, because CSA would outline certain things on the testing components. Because if we can't reduce the forces under 900 pounds, say on the rope grabs, if we can't reduce the forces and we're dropping weights that are 100 pounds, and they're generating dynamic forces, they're obviously just not going to pass. I just don't know enough about the actual CSA testing, but that would be called out. That there are dynamic forces that can occur both in something too heavy or dropping on something that's not doesn't have a fall arrestor itself, like an energy absorber, or something that's too light.
Okay, great. I'm just going to take one more look through our questions. Someone would like to know, when the standards change, do we have to change out old harnesses for ones with the new standards?
No, not necessarily. So when the harness standards change, again, as you go to purchase new equipment, that stuff will eventually kind of rid of itself 5, 10 years after a standard change. Certain industries, though, or certain provinces will call out that you have to be compliant within 30 days of a new standard changing too. So it's really up to the company. It's up to your province, to your construction, industrial, or federal standards. Things like leading edge. If you're using non-leading edge in a leading edge situation, you would have to get rid of that only because there would be a dynamic failure in the event of a fall, not just because the standard change happened.
Okay, great. All right. It looks like that is it, Sally. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us and share all this information. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brandy. Appreciate it. Thank you.
As we head into our break, here's a special message from our gold sponsor, Levitt Safety.